Hello, everyone. My name is Keri Ramirez. I am the Managing Director of Studymove, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this key data update. As we all know, the international education sector here in Australia is facing great challenges, but also big uncertainties. And this is the result of so many different changes that we had in the policy framework, changes that it seems that they are ongoing because we still have big question marks on what it might happen next year. So for us, we thought it would be very useful just to share with you some of the data that we have collected and the analysis that we have put together in an area that I think is critical for universities, is critical for their funding model, and is critical for the way in which they engage with international applicants. And of course, I'm talking about the topic of pricing international fees. So we have put together a very, very interesting session. There are some very clear findings on how universities are adjusting as a result of these changes in the policy framework. So we are very, very happy just to share that with all of you. Of course, aiming to complement your own institutional views. We know that every education provider is in a different space and everybody has different views about it. But what we are trying is just to provide something else that we think it would be useful for you and your teams. So welcome and thank you so much for the time and thank you for joining this session. All right. I really want to start acknowledging something that I think is very important. We know that pricing is a very important part of the marketing mix for any organization, not only for universities. But setting prices in international education is actually quite complex and challenging. And I know that every year universities, they make a big effort just to get it right because there are so many different factors that have to be considered. One important factor is that international revenue is part of a big funding model that includes domestic fees, things that come from research, grants, and some others. So universities are looking on how the right pricing, of course, can help them just to reach the financial goal. But it's always this balancing game of trying to reach your financial goals, but also meet the demands on the market. Of course, every university and every university program has a space in the market. And I think everybody aims to reach that particular audience that helps you to maximize your recruitment efforts. So there's always this balancing game. And these two forces have been playing significantly in 2025, and you will see that through the presentation. But I also think that it's important to acknowledge that different to other sectors or other organizations, there's a big challenge in international education because the price that you choose for your programs needs to work not only in one market. It actually needs to work across many, many different markets and, of course, across different currencies and fluctuations on exchange rates. If you think about a car manufacturer like Toyota, you can buy a Corolla in Japan that will cost very different to the cost in Germany or to the price that you see in Australia. So in many other organizations or sectors, there is the opportunity to have a price differentiation strategy. But we don't have that in international education. The price that you get needs to work for all markets, and that's a really big challenge. And also, it's a challenge that universities don't have only a few products or a few programs. They have sometimes 100 or 200 different programs. And each one of them somehow needs to work in the market. It needs to work to really engage with that quality applicant that works for your university value proposition. So it is quite challenging just to find the right pricing. And this year in particular, things got more complicated because on top of all this year we had the results of a rapid execution and implementation of a lot of policies from the Australian government. policies that you all are very aware that exist and is creating a big disruption in the way in which universities are engaging with international applicants. So it has been this year, the process of getting the right fees, I can imagine it has been extremely complicated. And something that is actually quite interesting, and I think is important to address, is that this policy framework is actually affecting universities in very different ways. Something that we have said in previous key data updates is that really up to 2023, more or less every single Australian university had the same set of rules to engage with international applicants from a policy framework. Some universities probably had more internal resources to engage with applicants, or they have higher priorities, or they have a different brand. But externally, from a policy framework, everybody had pretty much the same set of rules. And that has changed significantly since 2024, and in particular this year with implementation on what it could be pretty much caps or soft caps, which actually came in place in December last year with the announcement of the Ministerial Direction 111, where basically each education provider is actually in a different set of rules, and basically from a university point of view is creating two very distinctive groups. We have one group of universities that are or will be affected by these caps. Basically, they're going to reach their cap. We call that a growth constrained universities. And those universities will have delays in their visas when they reach the 80% of the cohort that it was allocated. And then we have a second group, which is potential growth universities, which they are not close to that gap. So they have obviously the potential to keep growing the international program. And the creation of these two groups is also creating a different perspective on how universities are and probably will set their pricing from now on. Because the first group, the group that is constrained, the group that probably is unable or most likely unable to grow the volume of new international students, because you cannot grow your numbers and you have financial gaps, you need to basically look how to maximize revenue. And the way in which you can actually do that is setting probably higher prices. So that's something that is most likely to happen as a result of these policies. And the second group, which they obviously have room to grow, they had obviously the opportunity to grow their volume, to grow the international student program, and they have that opportunity and probably the priority to increase market share. They see this opportunity happening. Now, on top of that, I think that there is something that is putting universities in a more cautious and probably more challenging situation, which is we don't have certainty that these particular policies will continue. We know that somehow it seems that everybody will be in this cap or soft cap kind of environment, but we don't know in which place or form, because not only as a result of a federal election, but because we still don't have an idea of what's happening, it's still not clear of how things are going to move along. So probably a lot of universities are just saying, well, look, just in case that thing gets worse, let's just implement certain policies or initiatives that help us just to deal with this challenging situation. So it's really challenging to create these pricing strategies, and definitely the set of policies are affecting everyone, and it's creating two different views in which universities are adjusting their pricing strategies. And we're hoping that the data that we're going to present to you will give you an initial understanding of where everybody's heading. And what we're going to do is that we're going to share a lot of the results of the main findings of the data that we have collected for this year. As you know, every year we collect more than 6,700 programs offered by all Australian universities. And that is really helping us just to create a very comprehensive analysis where basically we look at the average annual international fee for each university, And then we actually separate that by the annual fee for undergraduate programs, for postgrad, for different broad field of study. So actually the result is actually very, very comprehensive. Today is just the main findings, but for all the universities who have been supporting it, and I'm going to say thank you to everybody because we had a great response this year from everybody. They can actually see a quite comprehensive analysis that we have put together. And now that I'm saying thank you, I need to say 10 times more thank you because we just realized that we have been doing this for 10 years. So it has been a decade of looking at fees. And I'm just overwhelmed of how much support we're receiving this year. So thank you to everybody again for all the support that we have been receiving. All right, so this big data set allows us just to create three main set of reports, and I'm gonna use the three set of reports just to take you through some of the main findings. As I said, the first one that I'm gonna share with you is the results of this comparative analysis where we see at the average annual international fee across all universities and how they're adjusting their pricing. And there are some interesting initial results into that. We're also going to look at another report that complements the first one, which is how universities are aligning to the university rankings. We know that there is a relationship there, and I just want to highlight how these things have changed as well this year. And finally, and spoiler alert, this is the area where we have seen the biggest change this year. I also want to talk to you about scholarships for new international students, which it has been quite interesting. We also put together that report, and there are some very valuable lessons that I think everybody can follow in how universities are adjusting also their scholarships into this new environment. Okay? All right. So today, using this set of data and based on this context, first I really want to talk about just the fees and how universities are changing their position in pricing. Then I really want to take some time talking about the scholarships and then just going to finalize with some Q&A. As I said, we could spend a lot of time looking into this, looking at different broad fields of study, looking at particular rankings, but I just want to give you what I and Studymove thinks is kind of like the general story. Once again, with the idea of giving you something that you can complement your own views, because we know that in this year in particular, everybody is in a different position. Everybody is adjusting differently. So we just want to give you something that helps you just to complement what you're already looking in the market. Okay? All right. Starting with the results of the 2025 international fees. And as I said, we collect the data from every single program offered to international students, and we crunch it, we validate them, and then we actually look at the average annual fee for each university at different study levels and a different broad field of studies. But before I really jump into the numbers, I think it's very useful just to put some additional context. I already talked about the complexity of doing pricing, also the policy framework that is affecting them. But I think it's important to talk about the timing because the timing of these policies has been very, very unfortunate. I think that, and I understand that the times in Canberra or in the parliament in Canberra are different to the times of universities, but there is a very different way in which or time where universities set certain parts of their strategy and when the policy comes in place. And we know that most of universities, they basically estimate what it will be their fees a year in advance. But for the majority, the actual decision comes usually about early or mid the prior year. And if you think about where we were in about March, April of May 2024, that's exactly when the amendment to the ESOS Act was introduced to Parliament. And this is exactly when we as a sector were dealing with probably one of the highest levels of uncertainties that we have seen. Because although it was some sort of clarity of what will happen, it was still unclear on when this will be implemented, how, what is the level, what's the magnitude. So unfortunately, universities last year, they had to make very, very strong or difficult decisions with not a lot of clarity on the policy framework. On top of that, universities, not all of them, but a lot of them, were actually dealing with an increase in expenses due to the inflation that also came out of nowhere, and also pressures in wages, and pressure also in cost of construction that came also unexpectedly for a lot of universities that they have planned to develop infrastructure. They also came. And, the cherry on top is that the domestic recruitment of students, it was flat or actually lower than previous years for many, many universities. So it was a very, very complex context when universities were making these decisions. But I think that in particular, the uncertainty, it was probably the one that most of universities have to deal with it. So under that context, it's very interesting just to see the overall view of what happened, how in general universities react or respond, and in particular, how the group of universities, the ones that are kind of like growth constrained or with potential to grow, are actually changing their pricing position. So let me start with the big story. And something that we do every year is that we measure across all the universities and across all study level, we get the annual average international student fee. And we measure how much that has been increasing year by year. So as you can see, some of you have seen this chart before. Before COVID, the increases were about 5%. Then when we have the international borders closed, universities actually put a break in the increase in international fees. So 2021 and 2022, pretty much it was no growth in fees. And then as things were recovering, universities were back to the levels that we had in 2020, in 2019 and 2018. And that's exactly the result that we had in 2025. Overall, it was an increase of 5.2% that is taking us to the levels that we had before COVID. And 5.2%, it's relatively close to the inflation that it has experienced in the last couple of months. It's depending which period you see, but it's about between 5 and 6%, probably 4.9 to 6%. So it's really aligning to those big factors that exist. Now, as I said, that's the big picture. But what I think is interesting is just to see how each university is responding. And this is what I'm showing you at the moment on your screen. Every blue dot that you see on the screen represents the annual average international tuition fee across all 40 Australian universities. So you can see that some universities are actually on average having an international student fee every year of 25,000, and then you see how the numbers keep growing. For this year, the average is nearly, and this is undergraduate programs only, the average is about 40,000, which once again is an increase of 5% in comparison to last year. So once again, what I think is also quite interesting is just to look how some universities are reacting and or changing their pricing position. And the first thing when we were doing this that really got our attention is that we identify a university that reduced their fees 17%. They did not increase, they reduced their fees 17%, and they actually set their fees for most of their bachelor programs in around 25,000. I think obviously seeking for a value proposition and for affordability proposition to attract international students. Also, we saw a few universities that, from what we have seen in the media, they have some financial gaps or challenges that they have increased about 10%, so double what it was in average. But what it was quite interesting is just to see this group of 4 universities, because for the very first time, we have seen 4 universities that actually have an annual international tuition fee for undergraduate programs that it's above 50,000 Australian dollars per year. So when we start seeing all these changes, we thought it was useful just to start making an estimate and trying to understand these universities to which group belong. They are from the group that actually have constraints to grow, or they are close to their gap, or they actually potential to grow. So in order to have an idea of this, because really nobody knows what's going to be the result in 2025, but we look at the documents that the government provides to the Senate during the Senate hearings for the ISIS amendment, the amendment of the ISIS Act. And from there, we identify that or estimate that there are 14 universities that they are likely or very likely to reach the soft cap that it was created by Ministerial Direction 111, and another 26 that have the potential to grow. Now, what was interesting is that we start seeing some movement, and as you can imagine, this university that is on the 25,000 is in the group that it has potential to grow. So our assumption, this is us, we think that these universities see the potential to grow, and they think that with an affordable value proposition, they could actually grow their numbers. Now, the other ones that you can see on the pink circle, as you can imagine, and probably you're already guessing, that two of them are based in the metropolitan area of Sydney. They are large universities, and the other two are based in Melbourne. They're also large universities. So these ones are actually in the growth constraint universities. So actually changing their pricing position due to many factors, but it seems that somehow is skewing because they know that they're going to be having some limitations in how they can actually grow this year, their numbers, or maybe in the following years as well. And as a result of that, we thought it would be interesting just to see how those two groups are actually increasing their fees. And the results, although I need to say they are initial, are quite interesting. Because those 14 universities that we identified that they are in the growth constraint, or if you want to put it in simple English, that they could be capped. As you can see, they experience a growth in the annual fees of 5.5%, in contrast to the ones who have in that potential growth, who are looking for market share, and probably they have other things and other priorities who are in the 4.9%. So also, you can see both 5.5 and 4.9, and the average across universities. So we see that there's starting to be some movement in this particular area. Now, I should say that this is just the first year. There are a lot of uncertainties and other things to consider, but it seems that this is how universities are reacting. And we actually look obviously into more detail, and I'm sharing this with you. And these are actually the annual increases of the two groups. And as you can see in orange, we have the growth constrained universities, where the majority of these universities are in annual increases of between 5 and 6 or more, versus the other ones who are probably more in the 3 or 4%. So it's starting to show that universities are actually reacting and adjusting in this particular way. Now, these results are not 100% conclusive. We also have universities in both groups that they have growth before 7%, as you can see, but seems that that has been the way in which some universities are actually adjusting. Now, the policy is not one of the many things that they are considering, but it seems that it's starting to create these two very defined groups. So it seems that it's starting to be an adjustment across universities, in particular from these ones that back in the middle of 2024, they made an assessment that this will be having an impact in their financial situation because unfortunately, they were not a lot of lead time to adjust. The announcement, as I said, of the changes or the potential gaps were done in May with the aim of starting in January. So with the limited information that universities have, it seems that some universities, they knew that they had to do this change. But also this shows something that I think is very important. We talk a lot about the direction and the magnitude of policies, but clearly something that is affecting the sector a lot. And I think that it's going to be important to have calls to fix this, is the timing of these policies. There is not enough lead time for universities to effectively adjust. So with the limited information, with the uncertainty, and knowing that this may happen in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, they are making big decisions that I think they're affecting their financial model, and they're affecting the way in which they are engaging with international applicants. Now, when we talk about international applicants, of course, it's not only about the financial resources that you can actually cover. There is also, and I mentioned that, this balancing game, and sometimes is more important, is how the market is actually valuing your products and what is your target audience. What's the group of qualified international applicants that you're trying to target? And universities, if they move too far from that pricing range that actually help them reach that target audience, they could actually be affected. So there is still a little bit of, not a little bit, quite a bit of that balancing, but definitely it seems that we can see that some universities, they're skewing to trying just to cover some of these financial challenges and putting in the lower priority list, the marketing side of things. But it's not everybody, it's not rapid, it's taking time. And I think that in general, universities are cautious about this and they know this is the case. And this is clear when we actually see the results that exist between rankings and fees. So as I said, we have been looking at this space also for quite a few years. And this year, it's obvious that this way to align international fees with rankings is still quite relevant. And it's relevant not only for universities, but also for international applicants. I think that we have seen that international applicants, they kind of get, and I know that there are questions about this, but international applicants, they do perceive that universities with higher university rankings, they actually should be in the higher spectrum of what are the fees that they charge. So we have seen this relationship for many, many years. You see it now on the screen. This is the latest results for undergraduate students in relationship to the QS World University Rankings. We do the analysis also for Times Higher Education, and the results are very similar. But as you can see, the result between having a higher ranking and then having a higher fee is still relevant this year. In fact, the correlation that exists between these two variables is 0.72. Well, the absolute is 0.72. But what I think is interesting is that although 0.72 is still a high correlation value, things are also changing when we actually compare this historically. We have been very lucky that we have been following this for so many years. And as you can see, historically has been in the 0.80s, these relationships. And now, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, and now it's actually changing to 0.72, which in somehow suggests that not all, but some universities, probably they are breaking from this relationship, and they are definitely shifting into probably looking more at dealing with some financial challenges that they have, or dealing with these constraints creating, and moving away from that relationship that exists with the rankings. Now, this is the result for undergraduate that I think shows a clear sign, but for postgrad is actually more obvious. For postgrad is now 0.67, which is not even considered necessarily a strong correlation. It's called a moderate correlation. So we see that some universities are shifting. Now, what is a little bit of a concern for me is that I think the model that universities in Australia implement was very successful, because I think most of the universities, they knew which was their target audience, which was the group of qualified applicants that they can reach, and they used to set the right strategies just to connect with those students. And unfortunately, because of the changes or the way in which the policies were implemented, is really pushing universities just to make decisions that are moving them away from that decision-making process or those market-oriented decisions. And the risk that exists is that if universities, because of that, lose that target audience, they could actually be affected a lot more and not basically getting the number of students that they were aiming for. So we need to be very careful. And this is not only a call for universities, but to policymakers to understand how this change in policies is affecting and disrupting the model. And on that, the biggest change that we have seen is on scholarships. I think that it makes complete sense also to understand that adjustments in fees take time, they are more complicated, there are more things that universities, they do consider and they weigh in, also because the fees that they are set, they don't only affect new international students, they also affect continuing students. But scholarships is different. Scholarships for new international students really just are part of the recruitment process. And I think that universities feel that there's more flexibility or it's easier just to move in or out from this particular area. So we look at the scholarships offer for new international students in 2025. Once again, this is something that we have done in many, many years. And this is where definitely we have seen the biggest change. And this is where it's interesting and tells the story of what's happening probably in the sector. Let me just show you some metrics that I think will give you some insights in this particular area. What we have done for many, many years is that because universities don't necessarily report the number of actual scholarships offered or how many were awarded, we have been asking this for a couple of years, and it's extremely hard just to get that number. What we have been doing just to have a sense of how actively universities are using scholarships is that we have been measuring the number of scholarship programs that are available. And when I'm saying a program is, for example, when a university offers the Vice Chancellor Academic Award, that's one. And then if the same university has another one called the Vice Chancellor Excellence Award for India, that's two. So we have been counting how many of those programs exist and are in offering. And each one of these programs probably has attached 10, 100, sometimes it's unlimited number of scholarships available. But that number, as I said, is very hard just to measure. So at least this count on programs is really helping us just to understand the engagement. And we know from feedback from universities, it has been very, very useful. And this is how things have moved historically. 2018, 2019, it was about 550 programs offered. Then once again in COVID, we saw a significant increase into these programs, in particular fee waivers that they were offered to students that they were, of course, unable to come to their campus. And it has to be something additional just to attract them. But also it was a way just to acknowledge that they were not having the whole experience because they were unable to come to their campus. So basically, this was a surge that exists. Then as things starting to recover, we went back to the levels that we had in 2019. But look at the number that we had for 2025. It has been a very significant drop in the number of scholarship programs offered across all universities. It's even lower to the ones that we had back before COVID. And I think this shows that, first of all, makes complete sense for a university who has a cap or a potential cap to say, why I'm going to offer more scholarships if I have a limit in the number of students that actually can start in my campus. So they're actually withdrawing from those scholarships and those efforts to engage with more students. Also, I think universities are actually concerned about the financial cost of scholarships. And for so many universities that are dealing with these financial challenges, it was probably not the right move. And as a result of that, we have seen this year this significant withdrawal from the scholarships offered to new international students. And this is even more interesting when we look at the scholarships who were specifically for a group of students from specific countries. So some universities, as you can imagine, have like overall scholarships that could be for students from engineer, or it could be for students at undergrad levels. It could be an umbrella scholarship for students with high GPAs. But we, in the last couple of years, we have seen that more and more universities have been targeting specific markets with specific scholarships. And to be honest, some markets, India is a good example, it's something that you require. I think the market is used to have scholarships offered to their candidates, not only if they want to come to Australia, but if they want to go to New Zealand or to the UK. It's something that is part of basically engaging with applicants from particular markets. And Australian universities have seen that, and they have been increasing the offer of country-specific scholarships until now, because this was the year of a change. This year, about 2/3 of Australian universities offer at least one country-specific scholarship. This is down from 70% that we had last year. But what it has been quite interesting is where universities, not all of them, but some universities are withdrawing these country-specific scholarships. And let me just show this in this chart. So this chart is actually from last year, just as a reference point, as a benchmark. So this is the number of universities offering country-specific scholarships in each market. And these ones are the list of the markets where more Australian universities were offering these country-specific scholarships. So last year, number one was India with 25 universities, Sri Lanka and Indonesia and Vietnam, followed by the Philippines and Malaysia with 24. Then we have Bangladesh, Nepal, China, and Pakistan. And then we have many others. Think how much this is going to change next year. And I'm just going to put these flags there so you can actually have this visual illustration of how things have changed, and I will come back and forth. But when we look at 2025, first of all, I have to say that Pakistan and Nepal are out of the top 10. As probably you have seen, and if not, let me just put it back again. India and Sri Lanka are going to go down. Southeast Asia is actually now on top. And then we have now in the top 10, we have Latin America and Thailand. So it has not only been a shift, and this is not all universities, but quite a few of them. They are shifting not only to move away from scholarships, they're also moving away from a specific country-specific scholarship for certain markets. And this is 2025 in the yellow bar once again, now with the sorted by 2025 levels. But see how much is the difference in the green bar. So even Vietnam from 25, now only 21. But if you see India from 25 universities, now only 19. Sri Lanka from 25 to 18. So it has been quite an interesting change happening there. And as I said, quite interesting, Nepal and Pakistan, they are actually not a part of this anymore. This is the complete list. So you can see how for most of the countries, it has been a decrease in the number of universities offering country-specific scholarships. Latin America is the only one that now makes the top 10 with a +7. Thailand with no changes. And China is behind that. It will be a -5. So quite a significant change. And I think, we think that this change is once again the result of some universities assessing that they will be constrained to grow. So there is not a clear incentive of how to take the scholarship initiatives to support the recruitment strategies. They are also assessing the financial cost. But also, I think there is a relationship if you see how markets have been changing with the grant rates of particular countries. In particular, Pakistan, which has dropped significantly in the approval rates for student visas. I think also universities are considering that, and they're adjusting themselves based on this. But this is what the numbers are telling us. I'm sure that universities who are in market and have the expertise have a better feeling and understanding of what's happening here. But we just thought it would be very useful just to provide what the data is telling us to really support what you have, the expertise and knowledge in the market. Okay. So as you can see, we're starting to see in some instances, some changes. In the case of a scholarship, some significant changes in the way in which universities are adjusting to this new policy framework. I think that also shows how massive was this change for universities and how it's creating these distinctive groups, and it's creating that universities are actually taking different directions based on how the policies is changing them or not. We think that this is an initial adjustment, and I think that this is also the result of making decisions under a great deal of uncertainty. I think that everybody did at their best, and based on the very limited knowledge and reassurance that exists, everybody made those decisions. But also, I think that's interesting to see that, yeah, in regards to fees, obviously, it's something that it takes higher considerations than with the scholarships that we have seen that it has been a more clear and defined trend if moving away from the use of this initiative. The only thing that I can say, and I keep getting this question, I think that the main question that we're getting at the moment is, what can we expect in the future? Well, definitely what we can expect is that it will be more changes ahead, which is not healthy, by the way. I think that what the sector requires is stability and certainty. But depending on how the policy shifts again or not, and hopefully will have a very clear understanding on this as after the election, as soon as possible would be great. But definitely we'll see that universities will have to make further adjustments. We think that also for this is when detailed data will be essential, because although this is just the big picture and the big story, every university will be has a different priority in markets, a different group of applicants. So I invite you just to complement this with your own views and your understanding of your institutional goals, because as I said, this is just kind of like the big picture that I think helps. It brings perspective, but looking at the detail will be very important. And I think that it shows also something that it has been calls, but maybe we need stronger calls in regards to this. The certainty in policies is vital. I think that probably one of the massive issues that everybody is dealing with is the uncertainty. I can't believe that there is still no clarity on what's going to be the 2026 policy framework. So I think that it would be great just to get some clarity, because even if we get it in July this year, it's still gonna make universities once again to rush and to maybe make decisions that they don't have enough time to be processed. Is basically once again based on what we think is best for everybody. So hopefully we'll get certainty as soon as possible. So thank you so much for joining us. We didn't want to overwhelm you with a lot of information. We just want to provide you this kind of like big picture of what we have seen. I really hope that this will help, and this will help you to complement what you are looking. If you want more information about the different data sets that we have available, please let me know. We're more than happy to provide you with more information. Once again, thank you to all the universities who are already purchasing all this and for all their support. So once again, thank you for your time. Thank you for connecting with us. And I'm hoping that these insights are valuable for everybody. Okay. Thank you. And that's it. Excellent. Thank you so much for your help. It's just about the time to leave. So I really, really appreciate once again your connect with you. I really hope that these 45 minutes of data are useful for everybody. And I hope you'll have a great weekend. If you're traveling to India to the the Asia Pacific International Education Conference, API, safe travels to everybody. And once again, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be more than happy to assist you and to connect again with you very soon. Take care. See you, everybody. See ya.